Hey, welcome to another video. Today I want to talk a little about bouncing out tracks ready for mixing or mastering. I've done a video previously on that and I'll post a link to it in this video. But I got in a situation where I'd been working on a number of tracks, 13 to 14, that I were getting ready for an album, and didn't really want to go through and bounce each one out ready for mastering. So I set about the challenge of figuring out how to try and automate that. So if you're interested in seeing what I'm doing, stay tuned. Please subscribe if you like the videos that I'm putting out. And I'll show you how I'm automating bouncing out of tracks, multiple tracks from within reason.
This is where. This is where. This is where. This is where we all get down.
Okay, so I was looking at how I could automate the bouncing out of tracks from reason without having to do each song individually. So I've got 13 or 14 tracks that I wanted to bounce out for mastering, and couldn't find a way of really doing this sort of like from the command line, where you could maybe pass reason a set of parameters and you know, bounce out the track without having to load each one individually, go into the bounce menu system, checking the options and then waiting and then doing the next one. So I start to have a little play around with this product here called AutoIt. So autoitscript.com, and this is freeware. It's on version 3 and it's a scripting language, so it's designed for automating Windows GUI, so graphical user interfaces, sort of general scripting. So what I was playing around with here are things like keystrokes in order to open certain dialogues, move around that dialogue, check certain options, and then hopefully bounce out the track. So if you download and install this, obviously you can get it from here. You'll find that you'll get a couple of things here. So the first one really to focus on here is the editor, and this is where you actually write the script. I'll dive into this in a little bit more detail in a second. You get a couple of other products here. One is this sort of window finder, where you can find information about certain windows, so certain software on your OS, you can determine what things like the class name are, and that's important when you're telling the script which particular class name you're interested in interacting with. There's a third one which we'll see further to the end, where you can actually execute this script. Okay, so it comes with all the necessary things that you need in order to try and automate some of the UI stuff. So let's take a look at this script that I put together here. So there's a few parameters being set at the top, things like the class name that we just talked about, a delay that I'll talk about a little bit later, the path to my reason executable. So this is the location on the C drive where the reason suite executable lives. And then I have a folder where my reason files exist. Okay, so I said I've got 13 to 14 of those that I was going to try and bounce out. So the approach I came up with here was I'm just using 2 as an example here, but obviously you'd up the count on the array if you wanted to do 13 or 14. But I'm creating an array here, and then I'm listing out each position in the array, the name of the track that I want to bounce out. So here's my first track, fully qualified with the name and the extension, and then the second track, and so on. So you can continue to build up that list of tracks that you wanted to bounce out. Then we hit this for loop here, so I'm iterating over the array for each track in the array, just setting up the path where the executable is, which was set further up in reason path exe, and then the path and the track combined to find the reason file within that folder. Showing maximize, that's going to run reason maximized, and then there's a wait command here which is waiting to make sure that thing gets loaded. So this is what the class name is here, Igloo document window. So if you have reason open and you use this little tool here to identify certain windows, if I just hold this and then drag over here, you'll notice the class. There's a variety of information going on here, but you can see the class name for reason is Igloo document window here. The title is the track that I've got open at the moment. Okay, so that's how I determine the class name for reason. Then what's happening here is, as I'm iterating through, so reason's open, basically it's ready for bouncing out. So what I'm sending here are various keystrokes. Okay, so I'm going to the file menu here, which if we flick back to reason opens up this menu item, and then I'm hitting the down arrow to come down to bounce mixer channels. So again, you can see there I'm going down 16 down arrows, opening up that menu dialog box there. Then I'm tabbing 2, so I'm basically tabbing down to check all, hitting space on check all to basically highlight each one, because the difficulty I had at first is knowing exactly where my master section is that I want to bounce out here. So I always name my master sections the name of the track, so when it bounces out you've got the correct name on the file. I've got another video on how to do that, so I'll pop that in this video. But the way I went about it was just by checking them all, so that I just get everything bounced out. It's just easier than trying to figure out exactly where. I'm sure I could figure out one of these checks that contain a certain value, but that might be tricky. So I just went to bounce everything out. I can always delete what I don't want afterwards. And then the rest of these basically just go through the process of making sure the relevant options are set here. So whether I want dithering on, the bit depth and so on. And then finally hitting OK. Then what happens is, and this is the bit that I'm still focusing on at the moment, is what sort of a delay do we need whilst we're in this loop. So obviously if you're bouncing out, depending on the spec of your machine, that can take a number of minutes for that to happen. So for the tracks that I've got listed here, I figured out around 8 minutes was long enough to make sure it got bounced out okay before it proceeds to the next one in the array. The next thing it does, it then closes reason, and then it reopens it again. So when you open it here, you get a process ID and you close that process ID at the end, and then you hit the next, you drop back up to the 4, and then you're going to run through the same thing again, but for the second item in the array, which is the second track. So that's the process, and as I say, you just list out in here as many tracks as you want to fire. So if I just take this particular path here, windows are that. These are all the files that I wanted to bounce out here, so I didn't want to go through each of these individually and try and just sit and export them. So that's the script. Okay, I'm going to close reason down, and then there, like I say, there was a third executable here, run script. Okay, and basically when you click this, it'll ask you for the name of the script that you're going to run. So here's my reason export automation demo, which is indeed this script loaded in the editor. You get 32-bit and 64-bit versions of these files to run. I'm running 64-bit here, but you basically select the script and you say open. Then you should see all the commands in this script start to fire. So it'll open up burn, being the first track, open up reason, and run through all these steps, and then export it and wait till it's done. Then it'll move on to the next one. The other thing you can do with this, there is another option that comes with AutoIt where you can compile this to an executable. So if it's something you're going to do often, you can compile a little executable that'll just sit on your desktop, and you can just fire this on demand and leave it to run to bounce everything out. So I'm going to click open on that script now, and Reason 11 Suite opens up. So it's executing this run line here to the relevant path where the exe exists, and it's taking parameters of the path and the track. So you can see there it's picked up 01 burn.reason. It's loading up all the relevant devices in that track. Then as soon as that Igloo document window is open, it's hit bounce mixer channels, and now it's going through and bouncing out the track, the whole of the track. So it's not the one between the loop indicators there. As you can see, I've got loop indicators selected. I've made it, I think, so that it does the entire track. So that will chug through that particular track. When it finishes, it'll close reason down, and then it will move on to the second track in the array and bounce that out as well. So when I'm finished, I should end up here with 2 folders on the desktop with all the bounced out files for reason. Seems pretty stable. As I say, I'm only sort of developing it for my own use here to bounce out this new album. But it's been interesting playing around with it. The only thing I would say is just make sure your tracks are backed up before you do this. It's not been thoroughly tested, but I've not seen any issues where it's corrupted any files or caused any problems with the .reason file. But you should always be backing your tracks up anyway, just in case anything happens there. So yeah, so that's how I ended up trying to automate this task. So I think if anybody from Reason Studios is watching this, it would be kind of nice if you could run Reason Suite exe and pass in a particular path and file name with some parameter switches, so that you could bounce this out just from the command line. And again, you could just create a little script file for each of the files in there. Obviously, this is not a big deal if you've only got one track that you're working on, but if you've got a few, if you're working on an album, you want to bounce them all out ready for mastering or whatever, you can just set this thing going and leave it at that. So again, if you like the video I've just put out, please subscribe and share on the socials. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah.